in occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, patriots and preppers. I am Mack Worley III, and this is On the Move, the show that attempts to inspire you to stand up for your rights. As I have said before, this is not my show. This is your show. This is your grassroots activism movement. It's the On the Move movement. It cannot function without you, however, it is bigger than one man. I want to thank each and every one of you for your patriotism and for taking the time to get involved. Today's going to be a really good show. Today is February 16th, 2014, and like I said, we have a really good show in store for you. I have some topics prepared here. I'd like to talk about Edward Snowden, the NSA, and what we can do. I'm also going to be taking listener calls and reading your emails, so feel free to join the conversation if you have anything that you'd like to discuss. The telephone number to the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that is 619-924-0986. Or email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com. Don't forget to check us out at onthemoveshow.com, here at blogtalkradio.com/onthemoveshow, facebook.com/onthemoveshow, youtube.com/onthemoveshow, and twitter.com/onthemoveshow. You can also check out our stores at onthemoveshow.com by clicking the shop link on the homepage. We have hundreds of products for sale on there. They range from t-shirts to freeze-dried food to books that I recommend to bumper stickers and so much more. Your purchases will help make On the Move bigger and better. We really appreciate your support. All right, so I know you guys hear me talk about the store a lot, and I know I bring it up every episode here, but if you guys take a moment, go to onthemoveshow.com, check it out. I have everything that's been designed on there has either come from myself or my wife. My wife is a professional graphic designer, and most of the stuff that she made was things that I was like, hey, I'd really like to have that shirt. You think you can make that for me? And she went out and she made it, or she came up with her own design and she made it, and it was really awesome looking. So I wanted it myself. So I put it on the store for patriots like you, by patriots. So if you're interested, go check it out. All your purchases on there will go towards our show, and we're gonna pump it back into the program here and try to make better production value out of the money that we get from that stuff. So anything that you guys could do on that, we'd really appreciate it. And thanks again. All right, so before we get into the meat of the show today, I'd like to discuss a few things here. We have been working, and I'm sure you guys have been listening. We're still in the works with PatriotFB.com, trying to get on that network. I'm still working on getting the required equipment that it takes to join on there so I can broadcast through Spreaker and still be able to take your guys' calls. The problem really is that Spreaker doesn't have telephone lines, but Blog Talk Radio does. So basically, I'm going to take your guys' calls the same way I'm doing now through Blog Talk Radio. I'm going to filter it through a mixing desk and then put it back into the computer and broadcast it over Spreaker. So I'm going to be using both. It's going to be, it's kind of complicated. It's honestly pretty complicated for me. I don't really understand all the ins and outs of it, but I do know that I need to have this mixing desk, and it takes a little bit of money to do that. So just bear with us. We will be on Patriot FB in no time. It's just going to take a little bit of money for us to get this stuff together. So again, if you want to support the program, feel free to buy some of our merchandise, and that will help. We have 3 different stores that you can do that at. We got the merchandise store, which consists of basically like hats, T-shirts, mugs, stuff like that. We have the actual affiliate store through Amazon, where I have some things that I've basically created in a recommendation list of things that I buy and I like through Amazon. And you can go to our Amazon affiliate store in the shop link on themoveshow.com, and it's got things on there that I recommend, like books and gear and prepping stuff like that. And then the last one is our affiliate store through the Freeze Dried Guy, and they have freeze-dried food and a bunch of other like survival style stuff, and it's all really good products at an affordable price. So check it out if you want to help out, and your donations, like I said, your purchases will go towards getting these kind of equipment that we need, better microphones, mixing desks, stuff like that. So Anyway, all right, I just want to give you guys a heads up. If you go to onthemoveshow.com right now, we have a new quick poll at the bottom of the main page on our website here at onthemoveshow.com, and you all can vote on it. It asks, should Edward Snowden be given clemency? You have options here, yes, no, I don't know. I'm really looking forward to what you guys have to say on this. Give me a heads up. I'm curious what you guys think about the whole clemency issue with Edward Snowden. Do you think he's a hero? Do you think he's a traitor? Even if you do think he's a hero and he gave us information, do you think that he should be totally given amnesty basically on this whole issue? Should he be free to go, or should he go to court and see what happens to him? Should he be tried by a jury of his peers? Will he even get that option? Leave your comments in the section. After you vote on the poll, there's a comments area on the other page there in the See Results area. Leave your comments. I'm dying to know what you guys have to say. Or you can give us a call here at the show. Again, 619-924-0986. Or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com. Okay, now for today's first segment, and we like to call this segment This Day in History. So I got a clip for that. I'll go ahead and play it, and here it is.
This Day in History.
Because people have got to know whether or not the president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Yesterday, what our country can do for you.
Mr. Gorbachev
defend our
tears down this wall.
And the people who knock these buildings down.
A date which will live in infamy.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
All right. According to Wikipedia, on this day in history, February 16th, 1862, 152 years ago, the Civil War Battle of Fort Donelson in Tennessee ended as some 12,000 Confederate soldiers surrendered. Union General Ulysses S. Grant's victory earned him the nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant. After the fall of Fort Henry, Grant moved his army overland 12 miles east to capture Fort Donelson on the Cumberland River. Foote's naval fleet arrived on 14 February and immediately started a series of bombardments. However, Fort Donelson's water batteries effectively repulsed the naval fleet. Stealthily, on February 15th, Confederate Brigadier General John B. Floyd ordered General Pillow to strike at Grant's Union forces encamped around the fort in order to establish an escape route through to Nashville, Tennessee. Pillow's attack pushed McClellan's corps into disorganized retreat eastward onto the Nashville Road. However, the Confederate advance stalled, and Grant was able to rally the Union troops to keep the Southerners from escaping. The Confederate forces under General Simon Bolivar Buckner finally surrendered Fort Donelson on February 16th. Grant's surrender demand to Buckner was popular through the Union. No terms except unconditional and immediate surrender. The general was known from then on as Unconditional Surrender Grant. The surrender of Fort Donelson was tremendously victorious for the Union war effort. 12,000 Confederate soldiers had been captured, in addition to the bountiful of arms that was in the inventory of the fort. However, Grant now experienced serious difficulties with his superior in St. Louis, Major General Henry W. Halleck. Some writers believe that Halleck was personally or professionally jealous of Grant. In any event, Halleck made various criticisms about Grant to Washington, even suggesting that Grant's performance was impaired by drinking. With Washington's support, Halleck told Grant to remain at Fort Henry and give command to the next expedition up the Tennessee River to Charles F. Smith, newly nominated as Major General. Grant asked 3 times to be relieved from duty under Halleck. However, Halleck soon restored Grant to field commander, perhaps in part because Lincoln intervened to inquire into Halleck's dissatisfaction with Grant. Grant soon rejoined his forces, eventually known as the Army of Tennessee, at Savannah, Tennessee. After the fall of Donelson, Grant became popular for smoking cigars, as many as 18 to 20 per day. All right, so that's today in history. We're talking about the Civil War and that, and it's pretty interesting stuff. So we're moving on, If you would like to join the conversation today, give us a call. The number of the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that's 619-924-0986. Or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com. At this point, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. If I can get this thing to work. I'm not sure why it's not working. Hold on one second.
Support On the Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Need design services? Logo design for $90, business cards, brochures, bumper stickers, signs, flyers, promotional products such as mugs, pins, bags, keychains, magnets, and so much more. Contact LaTasha Worley for a quote on your next project at Tasha, Tosha, at lworleyphotography.com today, or visit me on the web at lworleyphotography.com, and on Facebook at facebook.com/lworleyphotography, and on Twitter at twitter.com/Tasha Worley. Show your support for a designer who believes in the Constitution and your rights.
All right, we're back. Thank you for sticking with us, and I apologize about the technical delay on that. Sometimes Blog Talk has a problem loading the clips. You hit the play button, it doesn't work, so you got to click another clip, hit play, it'll load that one, and you got to hit play on the next one. So anyway, it's pretty ridiculous. Anyway, now it is time for my favorite part of the show. It is called The Weekly Defender.
And now it's time for the Weekly Defender. You have the right to defend your life, the right to defend your family, and the right to defend your freedom.
All right, in this segment we report about armed citizens in the news who have used their firearms to defend their family, their property, and or themselves. Our first Weekly Defender we found on KBTV Fox 4 News. A Port Arthur mother shot at 3 men who broke into her home and held her and her children at gunpoint. Police say the suspects left the 300 block of the 9th Avenue home without hurting anyone, but did take cell phones and other electronics. Moments after the men left, the mother fired at least one shot at the suspects. They fired back, but no one was hurt in the home. A shooting victim was found a block away with a gunshot wound in the stomach. Police are investigating whether the gunshot victim was one of the suspects. Port Arthur police say the mother shot at them in self-defense. They're working to determine who shot the possible suspect. That man was in stable condition, and investigators are still trying to identify the other suspects. Our next Weekly Defender we found from Fox, Carolina. On the search, the search for a suspected restaurant robber out of Greenville County is over after a man showed up at Spartanburg Regional Hospital with multiple gunshot wounds, according to Greenville County deputies. Deputies said a man with a gun came into the Wings on the Run along East North Street in Greenville Thursday night and tried to rob the place. That's when an employee at the restaurant pulled out his own gun and shot the suspect twice, according to deputies. They say the guy then ran away. Deputies tried to search for the suspect but did not find him. They said about an hour later they received a call from the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office after a gunshot victim showed up at Spartanburg's Regional Medical Center with 2 wounds. Deputy Drew Pensiaro said that they identified the wounded man as 22-year-old Calvin Benson and as the person responsible for the attempted robbery. Benson was transported to the Greenville County Detention Center and charged with attempted armed robbery and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Look, I personally love hearing about how law-abiding citizens use firearms to protect themselves. You know, you have a right to defend your life, You have a right to defend your family, and most importantly, you have a right to defend your freedom. We at On the Move, we support your rights, and if you have a story about how you've lawfully defended yourself or you'd like to comment about one of these stories, we'd like to hear from you. Give us a call. The number to the show is 619-924-0986, or you can email the show at talk@onthemove. at onthemoveshow.com. There we go. All right, the next segment of the show is called the Mack Attack, and this is a segment where I basically talk about outrageous news that I've heard recently. So here we go.
It's time for the Mack Attack!
All right, in today's Mack Attack, you all know how I feel about the National Security Agency. You know that I don't appreciate the fact that they're spying on every human electronic communication. They're listening to this radio transmission right now. By the way, hello NSA analysts out there. Thank you for tuning in, by the way. I do appreciate it. Feel free to stop by our store, and you can buy one of those NSA mugs that you don't seem to like very much that we have. By the way, if you'd like to hear the story on that, I'll give you a brief heads up. Not too long ago, I had a store on Zazzle.com, and Zazzle.com got a letter from the NSA telling them to basically shut down my product that I had on their store. It was a mug with a picture of a circle with a line going through that circle, and the words inside that circle said NSA, okay? Anyway, the NSA contacted Zazzle and said to shut it down, and even though that it is well within my rights of parody, I'm allowed to, first of all, make a parody about something and talk about it. Also, I wasn't pretending to be the NSA, and it was obvious that it was an anti-NSA piece of merchandise. It doesn't matter to the NSA. They didn't care. They're trying to silence and censor me. So they sent that cease and desist letter to Zazzle, and Zazzle having no backbone, they took my product off of the store. So now I go through Cafe Press, and Cafe Press appears to have a backbone. So awesome. Good on you, Cafe Press. I'm sure they've received the same letter from the NSA, but they have yet to take down my products. And I have a whole range of shirts and t-shirts, sweaters, hats, mugs, all sorts of things on there, like crazy amount of products, hundreds of products on there, and hundreds of products with the NSA, the no NSA logo on it. So if you are interested, feel free to check out cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. I'm not trying to constantly push this down your throat, guys. It's just is coming up in conversation here. But feel free to get the shirt that the NSA doesn't want you to have. You can have that logo because they absolutely would like to see that taken off the internet. But anyway, so because of that, I'm not really a big fan. Not obviously just what happened to me, but the fact that they're trying to censor me while I'm also trying to comment on how they steal our information. They're stealing every electronic human communication. They are data mining everything. They store it in giant databases so they can review it later. They're overseen by these secret courts with their secret laws. We don't even get to know about all these laws. How can we basically monitor our public servants who are supposed to serve us if they have secret committees that can't speak about what they know? How can they be overseen? How can we ensure that they're not trying to usurp power? And on top of which, it's already came out that the NSA has had problems in the past, obviously, with people misusing the information. We've heard how NSA analysts have taken the information and from their ex-girlfriends, and they've been monitoring their ex's phone calls and things like that. They said it's been caught. And they've dealt with it. How do we know that? And how do we know that they've caught everybody? How do they know that they've caught everybody? They don't. Because it's insecure, first of all. The information is just ripe for the picking. They can take it all. But what they're doing is they're collecting all of our communications, every phone call, every email, every text message. They even have the ability, and I know this is going to sound conspiracy theory-like, guys, but this is fact. They can listen to your phone as a listening device while it's in your pocket, turned off. They can activate it and listen to what you're saying in your room. So I would like to paint a little picture for you here, okay? If you can imagine the scenario of, have any of you seen the movie V for Vendetta? Okay, you know the scene where they have the button men that are going down the street in that van where they got the antennas and satellites on top and they're spinning around on the top of the van and they're listening to every conversation that's going on in your house or in those houses there, and it's really overt, the stuff that they're doing. Everything they do is out there for them to see that they're being listened to, and everybody knows this is going on. Okay, that sounds horrible. That's like some 1984 stuff, right? Well, it's happening to us right now, except they're doing it covert. And in fact, I think that's worse. Right now, if you have a phone in your room, they can hear everything that you're saying and doing. And that's just what we know about. Who knows what they're doing right now? I've heard crazy things that they can see through walls with your Wi-Fi from your Xbox. I mean, there is an unbelievable amount of information out there that shows what the NSA may be able to do, what the technology is there, and on top of which the NSA in our government that we know about is at least 50 years ahead of what we see in the private sector. So who knows what kind of technology that they have available at their fingertips now? How can we monitor people that have these kind of advancements over us? The answer is we cannot. You know, it's literally a crime now to speak out against this kind of tyranny. If you're one of these companies that are forced to give up records, you have no control over this. You'll be arrested for disclosing classified information as well if you're a whistleblower. You know, if a journalist gets some information, they go after the journalist and they seize their phone records to find out who their sources are. This is totally unconstitutional and it's a violation of the freedom of press, but it happened. Who's being punished? I haven't heard anything about it. I know it's a scandal, but I don't know of anything where somebody was held accountable for violating the constitutional freedom of press. You know, this is a human right, as I say all the time. It's not given to us by anybody. This right is innate. It exists. And the freedom of our press is so important to keep our government in check. How can we keep our government in check if we're not allowed to know what they're doing? And keep in mind, even if they have passed their little laws that make it legal for them to do all these things, if they pass act after act, usurping power and taking our rights, keep in mind that everything that Hitler did was legal. Why is that? Because he passed laws which made it legal. Something to think about. Anyway, in regards to this AP scandal where they seized the phone records of reporters, I have a news story here. According to the ACLU, the Department of Justice, in an unprecedented intrusion on the work of journalists, had obtained records for 20 telephone numbers according to the Associated Press, belonging to the Associated Press or its reporters, spanning April and May 2012. The telephone records obtained do not include the content of the phone calls, but they likely reveal the phone number of each and every caller on those lines for a period of weeks, and therefore they identify the scores of confidential media sources. The seizure of these records came to light only because the government has a special set of guidelines that require it to notify any media organization of a subpoena for its records within, at most, 90 days. The Associated Press appears to have learned about the seizure of its phone records, albeit after the fact, only because of this special policy. Today, the government has many different tools to seek phone records or personal electronic data from your phone company or internet service provider. They call this stuff the metadata that they get. They say that they can't see any of your stuff. They can't actually see the content of the phone call. Well, we know that's not true. They can see everything now. And even if they couldn't, are you going to believe them now? We can't believe anything they say. They've lost all credibility because they've already lied to us. They've told us they weren't doing this kind of stuff to begin with. And in many cases, the current laws do not require the government to provide you with any notice at all, even after the fact. As an example, take a look at two of the most significant tools that our governments have at their disposal, including those it may have relied upon in seeking the AP's phone records. They have the Electronic Communication Privacy Act of 1986. It's called the ECPA. And that sounds good, Privacy Act. That sounds like, hey, we'll have more privacy. Well, the ECPA permits the government to obtain exactly the kind of telephone records and other subscriber information that was likely seized from the AP. Under this statute, the government can require a telephone company to turn over a subscriber's local and long-distance telephone connection records, records of session times and durations, telephone numbers or other subscriber number identity, and means and source of payment for service, including any credit cards or bank account numbers. And with that information, they can do searches and basically find out, okay, here's his bank account information. Let's see what he's spending. We do a subpoena to the banks as well. And from there, I mean, they can find out so much information on you, just basically based on what you're spending your money on and who you're calling. They can find out almost everything there is to know about you on paper based on those things. The ECPA also permits the government to seek parallel information from an internet service provider, including the IP address assigned to the subscriber and the IP addresses of the websites he or she visited. They can find out what you're going to on the internet, every website you've ever visited, every website that's popped up. They know what you visited, and they're keeping it. They're storing this data. The National Security Letters, and that's another program that they have. They're called the NSLs. The NSLs authorize the FBI to compel a wire or electronic communication service provider to turn over subscriber information and toll billing records information or electronic communication transactional records in its custody or possession. No court order is required to approve an NSL. And since 9/11, the FBI has issued tens of thousands of NSLs each year. Documents previously obtained by the ACLU show that the FBI often uses NSLs to demand email header information, which include the to and from lines of individual email messages. This kind of stuff is unbelievable, but people don't even know that it's going on. They're able to get your information without even requesting a warrant. They don't need to go through a court order. They don't have to go through the court. They can just get it on any whim whatsoever. They suspect you of something or they don't. They just want it. They just want to look at your stuff because they want to. And apparently that's good enough for these secret courts. Is it good enough for you guys? I don't think so. And I'd be really interested to hear what you guys have to say. If you want to give us a call, the number of the show is 619-924-0986. Again, that is 619-924-0986. Or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com. You know, because of this, because of these are laws, okay? These laws require the private companies to actually turn over your information. They have absolutely no choice. And in most cases, because of the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act, it's illegal for them to notify you that this has happened or for them to admit that they do this kind of thing. This administration is systematically setting up the infrastructure to eliminate all whistleblowers. There's even talk about arresting the journalist who interviewed Edward Snowden, Glenn Greenwald. They're actually talking about trying to arrest a guy who reported on something that somebody came to him and told him. This is the whole point of our free press, is to keep these people in check, to keep our government officials, our public servants in check. So it's not their responsibility to tell if an information is classified, if they shouldn't put it on the air or whatever. They can decide the security risks or whatever, but they're not required. They're not held legally responsible for releasing classified information. The people that are responsible for that are the leakers. And we found that those confidential sources doesn't really matter anymore, because the AP can just find out who you are by, spying on your electronic communications. I'm sorry, not the AP, but the FBI, the Department of Justice. They can just check your phone records, find out who you've been texting, who you've been emailing, they can do all this stuff without court orders. So here's a clip from an episode of the Young Turks where they want to prosecute Glenn Greenwald. It's not the Young Turks that are saying this. They're discussing one of the members in our government. I can't remember the guy's name now, but they're talking about how he wants to prosecute, and they play a few clips in that as well. Here's a clip.
Peter King has decided that Glenn Greenwald and other reporters who might actually report on what our government is up to are very, very dangerous. So let's hear from the good congressman from New York, but in fact, it's of course the horrible congressman from New York.
Actually, if they willingly knew that this was classified information, I think action should be taken, especially on something of this magnitude. I know that the whole issue of leaks has been gone into over the last month, but I think something on this magnitude, there is an obligation, both moral but also legal, I believe, against a reporter disclosing something which would so severely compromise national security.
We're going to start taking actions against reporters. If you put someone like Glenn Greenwald in jail for doing his job, journalism, which, by the way, reporting on classified information is perfectly legal. So I don't know under what law Peter King thinks he can go after Glenn Greenwald. Okay, but if you put him in jail, it is a clear sign to all the other journalists, you're not allowed to do journalism anymore. If you have a leak, you have a source, we're going to arrest you and put you in jail. So they're not only destroying the Fourth Amendment by their, searches and seizures that are not specific to individuals, but that are a big dragnet, but they would also be destroying the First Amendment. So let's let this, again, I call him a congressman, but keep in mind with Peter King, a judge once declared him to be an obvious advocate for the IRA, which was a terrorist organization. So this man who's been judged in so many different ways and pretty much bragged about it, to be connected to a terrorist organization, now happens to be a congressman, a U.S. congressman, and he's talking about how other people are endangering national security. So let's let him continue.
I'm talking about Greenwald. Greenwald, not only did he disclose this information, he has said that he has names of CIA agents and assets around the world, and they're threatening to disclose that. The last time that was done in this country, we saw a CIA station chief murdered in Greece, where you have someone who's disclosed secrets like this and threatens to release more. Then to me, yes, there has to be legal action should be taken against him. This is a very unusual case with life and death implications for Americans.
Peter King is a notorious liar. Glenn Greenwald has never said that he's going to reveal the names of CIA agents across the world. Completely and utterly made up by Peter King. So he goes out there and what does he say? Oh, once an agent died in Greece. And Greenwald died in Greece. Greenwald, life and death. Oh my, we got to go get him. We have to arrest him. There's no life and death situation here. He's a reporter. If you arrest Glenn Greenwald under this insane theory, and by the way, if he says this is life and death, and hence we can arrest reporters if it's a life and death issue, on every national security issue, they would arrest a reporter. On every single one. If this qualifies, all of them do. And then journalism in this country is dead. And that's exactly what people like Peter King want. And remember, a judge said that he was an obvious collaborator with the IRA. This guy, there isn't a single person in government more connected to terrorism than Peter King. And now he turns around as if he's the protector against terrorism, and he threatens to destroy our Constitution. Apparently he's never believed in it in the first place, to take out the First and the Fourth Amendment as he targets his enemies. Enemies of the state. If they actually let you know what the government's up to, people like Peter King, well, that's very dangerous. It's not dangerous to the American people. We live in a democracy. We should know what our government's up to. It's dangerous to people in power like Peter King. That's why the people opposing them must be locked up. One more.
Do you think that Glenn Greenwald should be prosecuted for what's been released so far? I think you probably aren't causing much controversy if you're just talking about this guy potentially going out there and revealing names of covert agents across the world and compromising their security and their lives. But what about for what he's done so far?
I would say it should certainly be considered. The reason I say that is it's putting American lives at risk. This is clearly done, I believe, to hurt Americans, and to allow this to go on untraveled, to me, it's going to have great consequences for the United States. But I'm tying the two together. That, to me, shows his motivation.
What would be the proof that this guy's trying to hurt America? I think Glenn Greenwald will say, I was trying to help America.
Well, first of all, he's not. And secondly, the very fact that he says, to me what shows his intent is from him saying that he's threatening to release the name of CIA agents. There's no way that helps the United States. And that, to me, shows his motivation.
So he says he's trying to help America. No, he's not. Oh, I guess it's settled there. Okay. And he's not trying to release the names of the CIA agents. You made that up. And even Megyn Kelly on Fox News was like, okay, that was some nonsense hypothetical. How about this situation that actually exists on this story? Well, it's really harmed American interests. Really? How? Can you name one way that it's harmed American interests? No, but it harmed my interests, so please lock that guy up. And by the way, right now, Glenn Greenwald is free, and he has not been locked up. Peter King has not gotten his wishes, right? But the American government, according to reliable reports, is considering arresting, if they can, Julian Assange, indictments, etc. Now, Julian Assange took classified information that was given to him by a leak, by a source, and published it. And everybody said, oh, Julian Assange, he's not a reporter, he doesn't count. You think they're not going to count him? If Assange is arrested and then convicted in the U.S., what's going to stop the government from turning around and saying, well, look, Assange took classified information and published it. Greenwald took classified information and published it. The Washington Post took classified information and published it. Let's arrest them all. And that's exactly the point. Because what they're trying to do is kill investigative journalism overall, so we never find out what our government's up to.
I have to say that I totally agree with that. You know, it's funny being a libertarian. I find myself on the fence of a lot of issues. You know, it seems like basically no matter where I am, I'm getting somebody angry at me. You know what I mean? The Republicans, especially the statist rhino Republicans, I absolutely differ in opinions on a lot of things with them. However, they seem to hold the line when it comes to the Second Amendment, so I support them in that regard. You know, when it comes to Democrats, I typically disagree on so many areas. It is ridiculous. However, when it comes to privacy rights, a lot of them have it right. I'm surprised. Not all of them. A lot of them have it wrong too. But I'm just saying that there are some Democrats that have it right. And then you have these statist Republicans that are like, hey, you know, the government should be, you know, omnipotent and as big as possible. That way we can control everything and we can protect you. And, you know, the Patriot Act is a great idea. All these things. You know, forget the Fourth Amendment. It's not relevant. You know, like, this is stuff that we need to be really aware of when we're voting for these people. You can't just vote down the line. You honestly can't. And if it means voting for a libertarian, vote for a libertarian. You know, just vote your conscience. Actually learn the issues that people actually stand for. Find out what they believe in before you cast a vote for them. Don't just vote down the party line because they're a Republican or because they're a Democrat or whatever. Don't vote for a libertarian just because he's in the Libertarian Party either. Check them out. Find out what they stand for. But, you know, when it comes to this issue, it's pretty funny because usually, you know, a lot of times I listen to the Young Turks and, you know, other kind of lefty news organizations. You know, maybe the Young Turks isn't a great example, but, you know, a lot of things I do disagree on with the Young Turks, especially when it comes to gun control. They are an advocate for gun control. So, at least in a lot of stuff that I've seen. So, but, you know, it's funny. I sample so many different news sources to get the full story on issues, and you know, I find it funny being a libertarian that you have to do that in order to really see the full picture. And you know, I find myself sometimes agreeing with Democrats, sometimes agreeing with Republicans, and you know, I would say for the most part though, I tend to side more with conservatives, small government people, things like that, and I think that there is a reason. I had a conversation with Johnny Rocket. He was on the show, a guest on the show last week, and we had a conversation off the air. And you know, he was saying how he thinks that the reason why libertarians tend to side with conservatives more so than Democrats, than liberals, is because of the fiscal conservative issue of that being more of an importance than these social issues that these liberals tend to push on us. So it's more of an issue than these social issues. So anyway, I got kind of sidetracked, got off topic a little bit there, but anyway, as far as what they're trying to do, though, they're trying to come after the First Amendment. They're trying to dismantle it. They're trying to make it so citizen journalists like myself and like you, if you decide to pick up the torch, can't do anything. That we can't speak. They've taken away our right of speech. They've taken away our freedom of press. They didn't give us these rights. These are our rights. We gave them the authority that they hold in that office. Who are they to try to take anything away from us? If anything, they should be giving us, more freedoms. They're trying to dismantle these freedoms that we can use to keep them in check. That is a check and balance. That is one of the best checks and balances that we have, is to be able to find out what the government is doing. If we have whistleblowers inside the government that will tell us what's happening, we can use that information they give us and put it out there for people to see. And when people think, oh, well, you're not a journalist, you're just some guy. Think about it. Think about this, everybody, all right? I want you to really listen to what I'm saying, all right? The companies that are out there producing news for you to consume are companies. They're owned by people, and those people may or may not have some kind of agenda. More than likely, they have an agenda. Everybody has an agenda. I have an agenda. My agenda is liberty, personal responsibility, freedom. That's my agenda. My agenda is truth. These are things that I stand for. All right? What does this corporate company stand for? I don't know. But what I can tell you is that I don't trust the fact that our news is solely provided by a company, by a corporate entity. And that's considered the most credible news that we have. Is you choose this company or this company. You choose Pepsi or Coca-Cola. Who's going to provide you with the best news? That is not what our founders intended. They did not think of, you have the freedom of press so long as you work for Fox, CNN, MSNBC, something like that. You work for a accredited newspaper, but if you're just some citizen who takes it upon yourself to pick up the torch of journalism and try to get the truth out to people, tell a side of a story or all sides of a story or something, you're suddenly not supposed to have the constitutional protection that we all have, that we're all supposed to have. I disagree with that. And I will definitely say that is not what our founders intended. When you look at the beginning of journalism in our country, it was just, some guys that were writing books or writing newspapers, writing into newspapers. It all started with a guy in a printing press, and they released their own little newspaper for their city or their town or their neighborhood or their street, and it was just a guy who was reporting their local news. And that's how freedom of the press started in our country. And even look at something as simple as authors like Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine released a book, Common Sense, and it sparked a revolution. I mean, it changed the minds of the people at the time. And that was journalism. He was talking about a concept, an idea of freedom and liberty, and it was journalism. So, as far as WikiLeaks, the thing that happened with WikiLeaks, that's all we have to do is see what happened to Julian Assange to see how the U.S. government responds to these whistleblowers. Julian Assange, he leaked a classified video and documents from the United States that was provided to him from Chelsea Manning, then Bradley Manning. He now lives in an embassy in Ecuador. He's afraid to step outside for fear of being killed. All that for releasing information on a website. That sounds an awful lot like a citizen journalist. He's producing information, he's releasing information. The Young Turks, they had it right, I think. They were saying how, if you can get Julian Assange for releasing classified information, you can get any reporter that relates to anything on our defense, the country's defense. Does that mean we can't report on it at all without being put in jail? We already can't tell about things that are happening. It's unbelievable, the gag orders that these secret courts can put on people, and you can get a felony just for telling people what's going on, if you know. You know, I'm not saying that Julian Assange should be looked up to or even that he's a hero of any sorts. I'm not saying that. I'm simply asking the question, what makes him any different than any other journalist? Aren't we supposed to have a free press? Or is it just a free press as long as you only report on what the government wants you to? If that's the case, is that really free? That sounds a lot like state-controlled propaganda to me. Anyway, I have a clip here from Julian Assange, and he's talking about, the NSA, and he's also basically making a call to arms to hackers to unite against the NSA.
Those high-tech workers, we are a particular class, and it's time that we recognize that we are a class and look back in history and understood that the great gains in human rights and education and so on that were gained through powerful industrial workers which form the backbone of the economy of the 20th century, that we have that same ability, but even more so because of the greater interconnection that exists now economically and politically, which is all underpinned by system administrators. And we should understand that system administrators are not just those people who administer one Unix system or another. They are the people who administer systems. And the system that exists globally now is created by the interconnection of many individual systems. And we are all, or many of us, are part of administering that system and have extraordinary power in a way that is really an order of magnitude different to the power industrial workers had back in the 20th century. And we can see that in the cases of the famous leaks that WikiLeaks has done or the recent Edward Snowden revelation. It is possible now for even single system administrators to have a very significant change to or rather apply a very significant constraint, a constructive constraint to the behavior of these organizations, not merely wrecking or disabling them, not merely going out on strikes to change policy, but rather shifting information from an information apartheid system which we're developing from those with extraordinary power and extraordinary information into the knowledge commons, where it can be used to not only as a disciplining force, but it can be used to construct and understand the new world that we're entering into. Now, Hayden, the former director of the CIA and NSA, is terrified of this. In Cypherpunks, we called for this directly last year, but to give you an interesting quote from Hayden, possibly following up on those words of mine and others. We need to recruit from Snowden's generation, says Hayden. We need to recruit from this group because they have the skills that we require. So the challenge is how to recruit this talent while also protecting ourselves from the small fraction of the population that has this romantic attachment to absolute transparency at all costs. And that's us, right? So what we need to do is spread that message and go into all those organizations. In fact, deal with them. I'm not saying don't join the CIA. No, go and join the CIA. Go in there. Go into the ballpark and get the ball and bring it out with that understanding, with the paranoia that all those organizations will be infiltrated by this generation, by an ideology that is spread across the internet, and every young person is educated on the internet. There will be no person that has not been exposed to this ideology of transparency and understanding of wanting to keep the internet, which we were born into, free. This is the last free generation. The coming together of the systems of governments, the new information apartheid across the world, the linking together is such that none of us will be able to escape it in just a decade. Our identities will be coupled to it, the information sharing is such that none of us will be able to escape it. We are all becoming part of the state, whether we like it or not. So our only hope is to determine what sort of state it is that we are going to become part of. And we can do that by looking and being inspired by some of the actions that produced human rights and free education and so on, by people recognizing that they were part of the state, recognizing their own power, and taking concrete and robust action to make sure they lived in the sort of society that they wanted to and not in a hellhole dystopia.
So that was Julian Assange saying that we will be the last generation to be freed when all of these systems come online and connect towards one another. And this is the problem that I have, and that I'm really having trouble trying to figure out the best way to convey this message. One thing that I've seen, and I've had conversations with people, and they're like, well, what's the big deal with this? You know, and I can see something as small as, there was a conversation that was had recently on the Lars Larson show out here and in Portland, and Lars Larson was talking about how cops are putting on these little cameras that scan your license plate on your car. And they scan it, and they can track you, basically find out where you've been. You know, if a car scanned you in that area, they know where you've been, and it's saved in a database and all that stuff. And people were like, well, hey, and this is what Lars said, okay? They're like, hey, if they can see you, you're in public, they have every right to record you because there's no expectation of privacy in public. And if that's the case, what's the difference between a computer scanning all the license plates or some guy standing there writing it all down and, you know, saving it for his notes later and then maybe entering it into a computer database or something down the road? Well, here is my problem with that, okay? It's not just that one thing that's an issue. And granted, I will not deny that may help law enforcement officers catch murderers or car thieves or, you know, people that are suspected of terrorism or things like that. They may, and I will use that word very loosely, may help do those kind of things. We do not know because it's not yet any data out about it, about how much it helps. The problem I have with this is they will connect that system to other systems. It's not just that one thing. It's everything compiled together, becoming a giant system. It's the button men rolling down your street, listening to the conversations in your house. It's everything connected, except it's all happening without us even seeing it. We don't even see what's going on. All these systems are connected. An NSA analyst, with all the systems connected, can listen in your house, see in your Wi-Fi, check every electronic human communication, every phone call you've ever made, every text message you've ever sent, every email. They can tap into your Xbox Wi-Fi and see through the walls and see what's going on in your house. They can do so many things that we don't even understand. They are able to totally decimate your encryption, and in fact, most encryption companies are required by law to install back doors for the NSA. So it doesn't even matter that you have encryption on your computer and your software because they're required to install back doors. So that literally did not even take a half of a second for the NSA analysts to get your information. They just went into the back door like no encryption was even there. What are we doing? This is 1984. It's right in front of us. You know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is fact. I didn't want to believe that any of this stuff was happening. I used to just want to be in my little bubble and didn't want to wake up, and I didn't want to think that my government could do this, that my government would so grossly violate the Fourth Amendment. They would unreasonably seize all of our information without warrant, without reasonable suspicion or probable cause. They just take it all in one broad scrape of data, and they compile it into computers and put it into databases, and they just keep it, and they sit on it until they want to listen to something, or you're flagged by an algorithm that you said some kind of keyword or phrase put together. And these are programs. The program I'm speaking about is Project Echelon. Look it up, Google it right now, Project Echelon. It's been around since the 80s. They've been able to identify phone calls. On phone calls, if you said a keyword, they would flag you, and the phone call would be later analyzed by an NSA agent and analyst. So this kind of stuff, that was happening in the 80s. What do you think is happening now? The algorithms have to be so freaking sophisticated, they probably don't even need to listen to your phone calls anymore to find out everything that's happening. They just flag you within a certain thing, and then, they type in keywords like a Google search, and they can find anybody and everything, or everything that you've ever done. It probably transcribes all of your phone conversations into text, so it's easily searchable. These are the things that they can do. If they want to find every conversation you've ever had when you said the word bomb, I guarantee you they can just type in, the word bomb, boom, here's every phone call and your entire life that you've ever said the word bomb. This is what I'm saying. We have gotten to the point now where they can just keep everything you've ever said, look it up in a database, and use it against you later when they want to make you look like you're guilty. And I've said it before, the reason why this is dangerous is because the same reason why lawyers don't want their clients speaking to the press or anybody about their case, if they have a court case going on, because anybody can have something said taken out of context and made to look bad. So they can make an innocent man look guilty based on something taken out of context from a conversation they didn't mean, or they basically weren't even talking about the same thing that they're using it for. So this is something to keep in mind. Just because you are innocent, just because you have nothing to hide, that doesn't mean that there's any reason why you should be okay with the NSA tapping everything and listening to everything. Think about this, okay? When the Nazis were checking the mail of all the Jews in Germany, and they had the censor doing this, the Germans said, well, I've got nothing to hide, so... I'm sorry, the Jews said, I've got nothing to hide, so let them, I've got nothing to hide. And this is where it starts, why are they treating us all like suspects? We are citizens. We are their boss. In fact, I was talking earlier today, I had a conversation with my good friend Ben, who's going to be joining us here a little later on the show. We were talking about how... it's been said in the past from our founding fathers how they were talking about how citizens are the highest office in the nation, and it's unreasonable for us to expect our public servants to stay in office longer than certain term limits, which is why they wanted to establish term limits. Anyway, it just shows, it goes to show you that they didn't intend for politicians to be able to be in office forever, for people to sit on the Supreme Court forever. All these things were not intended the way that they're working out. They never expected somebody to even want to be in power for their entire life in Congress. They couldn't fathom the idea of somebody wanting to serve that long because they didn't look at it the same way. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in about a minute 30.
Support On the Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Need design services? Logo design for $90, business cards, brochures, bumper stickers, signs, flyers, promotional products such as mugs, pins, bags, keychains, magnets, and so much more. Contact LaTasha Worley for a quote on your next project at Tasha, Tosha, at lworleyphotography.com today, or visit me on the web at lworleyphotography.com, and on Facebook at facebook.com/lworleyphotography, and on Twitter at twitter.com/Tasha Worley. Show your support for a designer who believes in the Constitution and your rights.
And we're back. Sorry about that. We had a little delay on the line here, switching to back to the microphone, turning on. Okay. All right. So at this point, we have a guest that's going to be coming on the show. He's a good friend of mine. His name is Ben Philo, and he's been on the show before. This guy knows more about the Constitution than anybody I've ever met. And again, he's a good friend of mine. Ben, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You were saying when we were on the line there that you had something that you wanted to talk about. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, yeah, I'm flipping through the pages here. I've got my little pocket constitution, and there's a provision in here, and I'm trying to track it down. I don't have it memorized. There's a provision in here where it basically tells Congress in Article 1 that they shall meet a minimum amount of time every year or every 2 years or something like that. I can't recall the exact language, but by that kind of language, what they're saying is they expect that these guys who occupy Congress, their primary incentive is to go home and be home and spend as much time as they can at home doing their own life's work. But because they're congressmen, they have to serve a minimum amount of time doing the people's business. And so by that kind of language, the Constitution shows that the framers didn't expect there to be a class of people who emerged where their incentive, their motivation was to become career politicians who spent all their time in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. We've seen that historically that there's references. I believe it was from Ben Franklin that said that we're not punishing them by sending them back to be a citizen. We're actually putting them back in their rightful place as a citizen because that is the highest office in the land. So it's actually unfair of us to expect them to serve any longer than what they have established as term limits or what they had. I believe Pennsylvania, that's where Ben Franklin was from. I believe that Pennsylvania was one of the states that had term limits for their congressmen, but for some reason it never made it into the federal Constitution. But you and I, we've had conversations about this before, and I always say Mark Levin's Liberty Amendments. It's one of those tools that I think we all need to read. That's a book I highly recommend. If you're looking for it, go to onthemoveshow.com, click on the shop link, and go to my Amazon affiliate store. I have it on there. I believe it's for like $14 now or something on that store. So check in the book section. It's on there. But I highly recommend everybody read that book because he basically sets forth a bunch of amendments that he wishes to propose to the Constitution that will bring us back to a republic constitution, a constitutional republic where our government is more in check, and we've reestablished and reaffirmed the Constitution. And one conversation I would like to talk about with you, Ben, and I know we've talked about this probably to exhaustion, but if you could touch on the establishment of the 17th Amendment and the constitutional contract that we've discussed, and kind of enlighten our listeners briefly about the conversations that we've had about that.
Well, let me, before I go into that, I did find that passage, the provision I was mentioning before. It's at Article 1, 4, Paragraph 2, and it says, the Congress shall assemble at least once every year, and such meeting shall be on the first Monday in December, unless they shall, by law, appoint a different day. So at least once a year, the Constitution is telling them, you guys have to do this at least once a year, because they're anticipating, apparently, that if left to their own devices, they might not do that. They might not come to convene as often as they should, kind of a thing. So anyway, that's
we can only hope. We can only hope and wish that they wouldn't come to Congress so much. Then maybe they wouldn't. Yeah, it wouldn't be causing so many problems.
It's the professional politician mindset thing that I don't think the framers envisioned evolving to what it is now, and so I think that's what's being expressed with these words that I'm reading here. But as far as the 17th Amendment, so originally under the Constitution, senators were to be the mouthpieces for the state itself, where the House of Representatives was to be the mouthpiece for the people. And this came about because the big states during the convention had a lot of people, and they were really happy with having a representational popular representation, because that meant they had more power than the little states. And the little states said, well, wait a minute, that's not fair. And so as a compromise, they formed a Senate to give every state equal representation. And so the senators themselves, each state under that arrangement gets 2 senators to vote on all the bills. And so in the Senate side of the House, everybody has the same amount of influence. So that satisfied the little states who thought they were going to be dwarfed by the big states. Anyway, long story on that is, long story short, I should say, the people were represented by the House. The state governments themselves as entities were represented by the Senate. And those senators, the federal senators themselves, were elected directly by the state government officials, the legislators. They were chosen by the state governments to represent the state government in Congress. And so those state governments had a voice, had influence in how national policies were formed. 17th Amendment changed that. It took senators, the federal senator election process, and handed it to the people and away from the state legislature. So what this means is that there is a redundant representation of the people. There's the House of Representatives, that's always been the case there, but you only represent those who elect you. And through the 17th Amendment, federal senators were being elected by the people. And so technically, there's 2 houses of representatives. One of those is just called the Senate. And as a result, the state governments don't have the influence they used to have in the federal processes.
Okay, so and as far as the changes to the Constitution and the actual ideal, Ben and I, we had a conversation when we first met, and I'm just going to briefly let them know what we talked about briefly as far as our first conversation. Ben had, he was kind of enlightening me that the Constitution is in terms a contract. It's a contract between these states. And, some of the stuff that he said to me was hard for me to wrap my head around. I have this idea that the Constitution is a set of ideals and, it's a principle, but also at the same time, I didn't know as much about the Constitution as I know now. Granted, I'm still learning. I am a student of the Constitution. I'm still trying to figure that thing out. And as you guys will see from our constitutional study group videos, every time that we go to one of these things, we find a new thing. It's a new rabbit hole that we're diving into, and now we've got to go study and find out, how that is happening, what that meant or the meaning of that word or something like that. So Ben explained to me, and this really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that what's going on in the world right now. Ben explained to me that the Constitution is a contract, a legal binding contract where parties came together and they agreed to terms, and in those terms, one of those things was that they would form the United States and be a country. So basically, there's a story about how that contract may have been voided out, and I'd like to give you a chance to briefly describe that, Ben, if you got a moment to do that.
Alrighty. It's true. A lot of people like to describe the Constitution in terms of it being a social compact. That's the usual way that it's described. But the nature of a social compact is that it is a contract between body politics, independent nations, or independent bodies of politically self-determined people coming together, having the ability to choose their own destiny and choosing to exercise that in the way of coming together with other entities that are also politically self-determined and working out the details of their organization and agreeing on the terms and conditions. That is a contract, and it is, as far as Article 6 says, it's the supreme law of the land. That contract, the Constitution, is exactly that, and it is legally binding on all parties. The parties to that contract were the state entities, the state people who came together at the convention to create it for their benefit. They alone are the parties and beneficiaries of the Constitution contract. Now, as far as what you were talking about, how that was voided out, That's kind of a long conversation, but I'll try to nutshell it as best as I can from what I've learned recently about the Civil War. The Constitution originally had slavery penciled into the agreement. The Southern states refused to join the Union unless the North agreed contractually through the Constitution to leave their slavery alone. And not only that, but if slaves escaped the South into the North, the Northern states were required by that Constitution, that contract, to return them to the Southern states, to their owners. It was an ugly period in our lives, in our country's history, but it's still something that we can't just sweep aside because it's politically incorrect today. That was a fact of history, and if you're going to get to the bottom of what the facts of history are, that was a part of the deal of the original contract in the Constitution. Slavery was part of the deal. And the thing is the northern states also benefited from slavery because they had the big shipping industry. Their ships would go to Africa and bring them back to the South to sell the slaves. Part of the conditions of the Constitution was that in 1808, the importation of those slaves was to cease. So in 1808, when that rolled around, the northern states lost their economic interest in the slave trade. And suddenly, the northern states started getting all kinds of enlightened, evolved in their philosophies on the slavery issue, and the abolition movement really started kicking in after they no longer had an economic interest tied to it. So it's kind of funny. And the northern states started literally passing laws that said that we are not going to honor the fugitive slave provision of the Constitution. We are not going to return your slaves to you, Southerners, if they make it up to our states. So they were passing state laws that literally made it a crime for state officials to carry out their constitutional duty of sending slaves back to the South. Now, don't get me wrong, slavery is among the ugliest things that the human race has ever done to itself. It's a despicable, abhorrent institution, but we can't look at this issue through the eyes of our modern sensibilities. We have to keep focused on what the facts of the day were back then. And back then, the South had a contractual agreement on the slavery issue, and so their consent to joining the Union literally hinged on that slavery issue and those slavery conditions. And consent is a fundamental part of the legitimacy of a contract. And so when the northern states started saying that we're not going to honor our obligation to you to send your slaves back, among a bunch of other things, there's a lot of stuff going on, but that was one of the real offensive things that basically drove the South to say, look, we had an agreement of something that we trusted you, our fellow brothers who we fought alongside during the Revolution, we trusted you to honor this agreement, and you're not doing it. This agreement was what gave you our consent. We are going to withdraw our consent because you are showing bad faith on this contractual agreement. We are withdrawing from the Union based on your bad faith in this contract. And they had the legal right, the lawful right to do it. And once they withdrew from the Union, half the Union ceased to exist. Half of the constituency of the original Union stopped being a part of the Union. And with that, there was no longer the parties that originally made up that contract. Half the parties left the contract. You don't have a contract survive when most of the parties separate from it. And when that contract was basically shut down because the parties to it walked away from it due to bad faith, the Constitution stopped existing. At least it sure. I have a hard time coming to any other conclusion. I'm still doing research on it. I want to find out more about it, but the thing is Lincoln himself has declared that he can't for sure argue how it is that what he's doing was legal. He was tripping on himself trying to figure things out. And the northern press was itemizing the reasons why the war that he was promoting, wanting to fight against the South. The Northern press was itemizing what he was doing that was unconstitutional. And for that, he literally took many of those journalists and put them in prison without habeas corpus. He locked them up and threw away the key.
It sounds a lot like what's going on today.
Exactly. Lincoln started this template. Just so you know, Lincoln is the originator of the executive order government process. And when he went into the South, martial law took over. The Constitution stopped. And it was actually dead because the South withdrew from it anyway. Martial law took over for the whole country. And he actually commissioned a guy named Francis Lieber to create a new body of law that basically compiled all of the international community's history on the law of war and put it into a code. It was called the Lieber Code. The Lieber Code is what governed our society during the Civil War. And the funny thing is about the Lieber Code is that it said only a peace treaty would stop the Lieber Code from being in effect. Only a peace treaty. The thing is that when the war ended, it didn't end with a peace treaty. It ended with a surrender. There was never a peace treaty between the South and the North.
So we're still in a state of martial law according to the Lieber Code because it's still in effect in that regard, right?
And I have found current publications, and it's been a while since I read them. I can't come up with it. I can't recall right now the title of these documents. I have found recent documents of a report to Congress basically making reference to how what we have now is essentially the Lieber Codes modernized. So they were paying salute to the fact that what we have now emerged from the Lieber Codes.
Wow. Yeah,
so
I mean that's pretty crazy.
To dig through here, and I'm still in the process of digging through it, crossing my T's, dotting my I's, but I'm just kind of putting a nutshell of what I've discovered here recently, and I want to do more homework on it, but it's hard to make any other conclusions at this point other than that. So we wonder why our constitutional rights are the rights that are protected by the Constitution. We wonder why they're getting trampled. It may be because the Constitution that we all love and adore actually stopped existing upon the secession of the Southern states. And literally the Southern states were militarily conquered. They were subjugated militarily and have never regained their true original political self-determination as states.
And if any of you out there, you're listening to this, you may have been wondering, why are we talking about the Civil War right after we're talking about the NSA? Why are these two things in the same show? What's going on? You know, these two things don't have anything to do with each other. All right, well, this is where it comes together. This is it. This is your eureka moment right here, guys. The Constitution may not exist. There is a potential for it to not exist anymore, and it's because the actions taken by Lincoln, where he set forth a chain of events that created basically a military coup. And in this military coup, he started using these executive orders. He couldn't justify whether or not his actions were constitutional. He was listed off by the press, as Ben says, where he had all these violations of the Constitution and how he basically set forth his own complacent government in the South at gunpoint, taking people out of power. So with all this in mind, and we're looking at today what's going on with the NSA, you may be asking yourself, and I know I usually do, how do they get away with this? They're violating the Constitution left and right. They're usurping power. They're doing things that our founding fathers never intended for them to do. They're using the laws in ways that no one even knows about, because the laws were created in secret courts, and the laws' interpretations are secret. no one even knows about these actual interpretations. And in fact, I have a clip here from where they actually are on record. There's a NSA lawyer that Senator Wyden gets to confirm that there are secret interpretations of surveillance law. I have a clip right here. I'm going to go ahead and play it. We'll be right back.
Mr. Olson, thank you for our visit. I appreciated your candor and also your taking extra time to go over and meet in the secure facility so that we could discuss some sensitive matters. I have been on this committee for more than a decade now, and I believe this is the first time we've had the top lawyer at the National Security Agency before the committee in an open session. Now, I'm not going to get into any details of how the NSA does business, but since you are the chief legal officer at one of the country's largest intelligence agencies, it's safe to say that you are an expert on surveillance law. So I'd like to begin by asking a few questions about several areas of surveillance law and about how you and your colleagues have interpreted the laws so that we can get some of this information on the public record. The first question is, would you agree that key portions of the USA Patriot Act have been the subject of significant secret legal interpretations and that these interpretations are secret today?
Senator Wyden, thank you, and I do, if I may just say at the outset, I did appreciate the opportunity to talk to you in both your office and in the classified setting to talk about some of these matters, and I appreciate your ongoing interest and concern about them. The direct answer to your question is that there are provisions of the Patriot Act that are the subject of matters before the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, a court that by design meets in a classified setting, and some of the pleadings and opinions that relate to the Patriot Act that have been part of proceedings before the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court are classified.
So it is fair to say that key provisions of the Patriot Act and how they're legally interpreted are being kept secret as of today.
It is certainly fair to say that there are opinions from the court that are classified. I do feel it's important to add that those opinions are part of what is provided to this committee, and that the activities that are undertaken in accordance with those orders of the court are subject to extensive oversight from across the government.
Would you agree that key portions of the FISA Amendments Act of 2008 have been the subject of significant secret legal interpretations and that those are secret today?
So let me say yes, and then let me add that the answer is that similar to the Patriot Act, there are particular provisions of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that in the course of implementing those provisions, the government, and I was part of this effort, submits pleadings to the FISA court, and then by design, again, under the statute, the FISA court considers those pleadings in a classified setting and then issues opinions authorizing or not those activities. And it is the case, if I may also add, that as we've reviewed those opinions, as we've looked at those opinions, working with you and others, that it's very difficult at times to separate those portions of the opinions that are subject to, could be disclosed because they only contain legal information versus the linkage or intertwining of legal analysis and facts.
So you have said that there are, in fact, secret legal interpretations with respect to both the Patriot Act and the FISA Amendments Act, and is there anything further that you can tell us about their subject matter?
I don't think there's anything further that I can discuss in an open setting, and I know you appreciate that, Senator. I know you appreciate obviously you do, the importance of protecting the sources and methods that are described in those opinions. I would restate what I just said. That
my time is very
certainly
short. You've given thoughtful answers. As you know, we have a difference of opinion here. It's my view that we have to keep operations and methods secret, but we've got to also have public awareness of the laws on the books. We're going to continue this discussion, I'm sure. I need to ask you one other question, and that is on a different legal topic. do government agencies have the authority to use cell site data to track the location of Americans inside the United States for intelligence purposes?
Senator, I know that that's a question that you've posed to the Director of National Intelligence, Director Clapper. It is a question that is a complicated and difficult question to answer, particularly in this setting. I will say that the intelligence community is working as we speak. I know we've talked to your staff in developing a comprehensive answer to that question, which will be provided to you in writing.
Madam President, I know my time has expired, but just a quick follow-up on that. You seem to be suggesting, then, Mr. Olson, that the executive branch has not yet settled that question. Is that accurate?
I think it's very important to be precise about exactly what the question is.
The question is, does the government have the authority to use cell site data to track the locations of Americans inside the country? I think you answered initially that it had not yet been settled by the executive branch with respect to whether or not there is that authority. I think this is an extremely important point. I just want to make that clear, that I believe you're saying it has not yet been settled by the executive branch that it has that authority.
I think there are certain circumstances where that authority may exist. I do think it's a very complicated and difficult question, and I would ask your indulgence to allow that question to be prepared in an unclassified setting in writing to you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have the top NSA lawyer confirming secret interpretations of surveillance laws. We can't even discuss them in open settings because it's classified. We have secret courts creating secret laws that we can't talk about. Wyden serves on the Security Council. He's known about this stuff for decades, which is exactly why for decades he's been against what they're doing. He's been trying to wake people up, and nobody was paying attention until Edward Snowden leaked all this information. So are we able to have this kind of stuff going on? Is it constitutional? Who knows? Who knows if there's a constitution anymore? Is it lawful? Well, like I said, that really doesn't matter. Everything that happened in Nazi Germany was lawful. People were following orders. Are we, as a society, heading down that path? Now, I'm not calling our leadership Nazis. They may be leaning towards fascism, though. And we are headed down a path that we see that we're allowing the government to govern us without our consent. And it is an illegitimate government that governs without the consent of the people. That's the same concept of the contract. You can't enter into a contract without consent. That's coercion, and that's not a voluntary government. That's not what we were supposed to have set up. It's not a government run by the people and for the people. That's exactly against the people. Anyway, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in about 1:30. Don't go anywhere.
Support On the Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Need design services? Logo design for $90, business cards, brochures, bumper stickers, signs, flyers, promotional products such as mugs, pins, bags, keychains, magnets, and so much more. Contact LaTasha Worley for a quote on your next project at Tasha, Tosha, at lworleyphotography.com today, or visit me on the web at lworleyphotography.com, and on Facebook at facebook.com/lworleyphotography, and on Twitter at twitter.com/Tasha Worley. Show your support for a designer who believes in the Constitution and your rights.
That's right. We believe in the Constitution, the principles of the Constitution. We believe in your rights. But does the Constitution protect you? does the federal Constitution protect you and your rights? That remains to be seen. I have here my good friend Ben Philo on the line, and we're going to talk about how the Constitution may not possibly, the federal Constitution, protect you from state governments, local governments, and what have you. This is something that I've recently been talking about, and it's kind of hit me as an epiphany that Ben has long since understood. Perhaps you'd like to talk about this, Ben.
Well, as far as are you still there?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, gotcha. There you go. Originally, the Constitution, the federal Constitution, was basically just an improved version of the Articles of Confederation. The Union existed before the Constitution, and the Constitution was just the framers learning their lessons of the Articles, everything that was bad about the Articles, and they did a better job of it with the Constitution. But the states themselves existed as independent nations on their own prior to either of these confederations or the union-making contracts. They were independent nations. And as independent nations, they had their own constitutions in place. And a lot of those state-level constitutions were used as, the language in them was used as the reference, the templates that would be adopted into the federal Constitution. And so a lot of people have forgotten the importance or that state constitutions even exist and the roles that they play in our form of government. Our form of government has two tiers of supremacy. There's the federal Constitution. It's the supreme law of the land where it applies, and the state constitutions are also the supreme law of the land where they apply in the jurisdictions where their application is germane, is lack of a better word. But where those two documents overlap, where they butt heads, whenever they butt heads, that's where the supremacy clause, Article 6 of the federal Constitution says, in situations where there is a conflict between state-level authority, constitutional authority, and federal constitutional authority, the federal Constitution trumps the state constitutions or state laws that conflict with it. So there are two levels of supremacy, constitutional supremacy, but the federal Constitution wins out if there is a butting of heads, so to speak.
I see. Well, as far as, on that note, the thing that kind of stuck with me is that the federal Constitution, it doesn't protect you against, state and local officials creating like city ordinances or state laws banning guns or whatever, because that's a federal abridgment that it's protecting you against. And the Constitution, the federal Constitution says that Congress shall make no laws, abridging these freedoms, or, I can't remember exactly what it says, but it says Congress, and it's referring to federal Congress. It doesn't say anything about state Congress or cities or municipalities, counties, anything like that. It doesn't say that specifically, which could be why, we are getting violated. Our Fourth Amendment rights are being violated. And then I've often thought in the past, and I'm sure many of you out there thought the same way, maybe not, but I've often thought, well, hey, the state constitution, that's almost like a secondary thing. It's an afterthought. Like, why do we even have that thing? The federal constitution, it covers us all, and it's great. Why do we need anything else? Well, no, we do need something else, and the reason for that is because the federal government only protects, the federal constitution only protects us against the federal government, the Congress. So in that respect, that's why we have a state constitution, and it's also important that you know and understand your state constitution, because what's in it, what is that actually protecting you from? And I know, Ben, you have a lot of opinions on state constitution. What's one of the laws? I know that there's a law in the Oregon state constitution as far as in regards to teaching the Constitution.
No, that's actually a statute. It's been on the books in Oregon since 1923. I'll just tell you what it is. It's ORS 336.057. That law is still there on the ORS website if you want to go check it out yourself. But that law literally requires all public schools in Oregon to provide, how the statute calls it, courses of instruction on the Constitution for a minimum of 5 years.
Now, is that referring to the state or the federal Constitution?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Is that referring to the state or federal Constitution that they're requiring you to study, or both?
The 336.057 pertains specifically to the federal Constitution and U.S. history as well. Basically what it boils down to is it requires courses of instruction that last for 5 years, both on the Constitution and U.S. history. They didn't add the U.S. history aspect of this law until 1977. The law was put on the books in 1923. So originally, the only focus, the only intent for this law was to be 5 years of Constitution education.
Man. Yeah, and we're obviously not seeing that nowadays.
But to answer your question about the state Constitution requirements, the very next law, 336.067, says that all public schools shall provide, quote, special emphasis, unquote, on, and then it lists a whole bunch of stuff, but on that list is obedience to law and the Constitution of the United States, federal Constitution, and the Constitution of Oregon.
Okay.
And so those two laws come together essentially to say these public schools shall provide special emphasis on these things, federal Constitution, state Constitution, and obedience to law, and in terms of the federal Constitution, for a minimum of 5 years.
Okay, yeah, and they're obviously not doing that nowadays. So we can see where they're violating their own laws, and they're deciding what laws that they want to enforce.
They have not done that for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated from Oregon schools, high school in 1989, and for a fact I know that didn't even get close to lip service to that law.
Absolutely. And one thing that I find funny, and it's something that I've noticed inside the Patriot movement, in the Liberty cause, I am ashamed at literally the lack of knowledge that I have on the Constitution, especially the state Constitution, and then the general concepts, these basic ideas that it was a contract that we entered into as states, and it was a voluntary agreement, and then on top of which that the federal protects us from the Congress, because again, contracts are legal documents, and words in documents, legal documents, have specific meaning. So they pick their words very, very carefully in those contracts. And when they said that Congress, it prevents Congress from passing these laws, and they didn't say Congress in the many states or territories, they chose those words very specifically for very specific reasons, because they didn't want it to broadly cover all of the states. They wanted to allow the states to govern themselves through state constitutions and state laws that were provided from that Constitution. And what better group, as you said, these are your words, Ben, what better group to govern somebody than their own state, their state legislators? Because why would the federal government be in charge of that? They don't know enough about the people. So as far as these basic concepts, I see a lack of understanding of the Constitution, and I think a lot of people are embarrassed to admit how little they know about it. Well, let me tell you all right now, I am no expert in the Constitution, and you can feel free to question me on anything, and I probably won't have an answer for you. and honestly, I'll have to look it up, and that's part of the constitutional study group that we're doing. If you guys are in the Vancouver area, we would absolutely love to have you out there. The Facebook page for that group is facebook.com/groups/constitutional study group. And if you're interested in getting some information on starting your own, email the show, talk@onthemoveshow.com, and I'll provide you with any help or assistance that I can do on that. But it's just a good way for us all to learn more about it. And don't be ashamed if you don't know about the Constitution. Don't be ashamed if you know very little about it or understand these principles, because none of us did. It's not like we had this knowledge at birth. Ben, he has studied his butt off to learn as much as he has about it. How long have you been researching, Ben?
Oh, it's been over 10 years, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, you study a lot. I know for a fact there's been times I've talked to you and you're just like, yeah, I was at the research library and I'm, got my nose in a book or something trying to figure this out. You study a lot. It's not like it's 10 years and you only studied, here and there. You've been devoted to this cause.
Well, I would have liked to have made it a profession, but I've had, life to live and other things to tend to too, but I have spent a good deal of time studying it. And just to put it out there also, for people who want to find out more about what the law says in the courts, for if you want to do more research on your own for due diligence or whatever, there is a publicly accessible database called LexisNexis. It is a case law search engine, and you can learn a lot from reading case law. Case law is basically where judges have the opportunity to share what they know in their role as legal historians. In a lot of cases, the case touches on points that, in order to make a clear opinion, they have to delve back into history and what led to different provisions of law and what they mean. And they'll dig up some really interesting stuff that fills in a lot of holes in our knowledge that the public schools have. So LexisNexis, for example, there is a free access, public access to this database at the Clackamas County Law Library down in Oregon City.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great resource. In doing that, and I've actually spent a little bit of time looking in some of the law records and basically hearings that they've basically determined case law over the last few years or whatever. It really does show you a whole lot. It's different than law. Like looking at a law, you don't really see the intent behind it, but when you look at the case law behind things, you can actually see intent. You can actually see why they chose to do things, and then maybe it branched off into another area, and they end up making a law from that next case law that used the case prior to it. At least that's what I found.
Right, and the nice thing about LexisNexis is it provides the reader of whatever case they're reading. It gives them a little symbol up at the top of the page that shows its status, whether it's still active, currently being used, whether there's some negative commentary about it, whether it's been overturned, and if you click on that button or the symbol for its status, it'll give you a list of the cases that speak to the case you're reading about and provide you with the details of what they have to say about that case. So it's a really comprehensive database. It's a powerful learning tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. That's a good way to do it, and I appreciate you telling everybody about that. That's pretty awesome. As far as the rest of the show here, we're gonna take another break here. Do one of the last commercial breaks we're gonna do of the show, and I'm gonna start wrapping everything up. I'm gonna do the listener challenge segment of the show. I really appreciate you coming on the show, Ben, and sharing your knowledge with everybody and taking your time out of your day. And again, I really appreciate everything you've been doing. And if you guys want to know more about what Ben's up to, shoot me an email. I can forward them to Ben, and if he wants to contact you or whatever, he'll be in touch. Talk at onthemoveshow.com. And Ben comes to our constitutional study groups here in Vancouver, so if you're interested in coming and getting some knowledge from him and meeting him and me, we'll be there. We're Sundays, we do it once a month on Sunday. This next one is the 23rd of February, 1 p.m. at Coffee Villa here in Vancouver. So feel free to show up. We'll be there. We'll be discussing the Constitution, both federal and state, and laws that affect them. So anyway, Ben, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for putting your show on. It's great.
All right. Well, we're going to go to a break. Everybody stick with us, and we'll be back in about a minute 30.
Support On the Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Need design services? Logo design for $90, business cards, brochures, bumper stickers, signs, flyers, promotional products such as mugs, pins, bags, keychains, magnets, and so much more. Contact LaTasha Worley for a quote on your next project at Tasha, Tosha, at lworleyphotography.com today, or visit me on the web at lworleyphotography.com, and on Facebook at facebook.com/lworleyphotography, and on Twitter at twitter.com/Tasha Worley. Show your support for a designer who believes in the Constitution and your rights.
All right, we're back. If you want to call into the show, we got 14 minutes left. I'll let you get a quick point in if you have something you'd like to say. The number to the show is 619-924-0986, 619-924-0986. At this point, we're going to go ahead and play a clip, and then we're going to go into the listener challenge segment of the show. And in this clip I'm playing is Ron Paul has created a petition to give clemency to Edward Snowden. Here's a clip from Russia Today, RT, and they're doing a news report on it. We'll be right back.
A former congressman says he wants clemency for former NSA employee Edward Snowden. Ron Paul has repeatedly praised Snowden for exposing the National Security Agency's spying program, and now he started a petition to demand that Snowden is granted clemency.
Edward Snowden sacrificed his livelihood, citizenship, and freedom by exposing the disturbing scope of the NSA's worldwide spying program. Thanks to one man's courageous actions, Americans know about the truly egregious ways their government is spying on them.
Ron Paul is hoping his petition urges the government to take action before Snowden's amnesty in Russia expires on July 31st of this year. That deadline is still up in the air after a Russian lawmaker said last month that the country plans to extend his asylum offer. Snowden faces felony charges in the U.S., and now those who were involved in giving him access to the classified government documents are seeing repercussions for their actions too. 3 people who worked at the National Security Agency, including a contractor, an active duty military member, and an NSA civilian employee, have been implicated, according to an NSA memo sent to the House Judiciary Committee. The NSA civilian admitted to FBI special agents that he allowed Mr. Snowden to use his public key infrastructure to access classified information. The civilian was not aware that Mr. Snowden intended to unlawfully disclose classified information. However, the NSA states that by sharing his passwords, he failed to comply with security obligations. His security clearance was revoked in November, and he resigned on January 10th. The other 2 employees were denied further access to the NSA as of last August. Additional punishments would be the responsibility of their respective employers. And the size and scope of the NSA spying program has again been revealed to be even bigger than what previously thought. Former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder was surprised to find out that the NSA was spying on him too more than 10 years ago.
I knew, of course, that there were always spying activities going on, but essentially no spying activities among friends, but rather under enemies, let's say. In this sense, it was surprising for me to find out to what extent this kind of spying took place.
According to German news sources, Schroeder was put under surveillance due to his opposition to military intervention in Iraq.
I challenge you to a duel. Did you hear that? Sounds like it's time for a challenge. Listener challenge. Listener challenge. Listener challenge. Listener challenge.
All right, this is a segment of the show where I challenge you, my loyal listeners, to a challenge. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to sign the petition that Ron Paul has set up to give Edward Snowden clemency. All you have to do is go to facebook.com/onthemoveshow. I have posted it on there for you all. The petition should be one of the most recent posts. It should be near the top. While you're at it, go ahead and click the like button on the page if you appreciate what we're doing. Sign the petition. Share it. Talk about it with your friends and family. This petition can be used to show our government that we support Edward Snowden's actions. It will send a message to our government that we will not stand for them spying on us without our consent or without our knowledge. It will serve as a reminder to those little men with little minds that they work for us. It will show a resounding support for Edward Snowden and reaffirm what Thomas Jefferson once said: if a law is unjust, a man not only has a right to disobey it, he has an obligation to do so. Our government knows that for every person that signs a petition, there are 9 others that feel the same way, but didn't even know about the petition. Please join me in signing this petition. I signed it earlier today. Stand with Edward Snowden. Stand for freedom. Please sign this, and it's really, really important that we get this information out. Share it on your social media. It is super important that other people know about this. A lot of people think that we can't affect change through petitions. It's definitely true that they could ignore us. It's definitely true, but at least it shows our politicians that we're watching them and that we're aware of what's going on. We're aware that the NSA has been lying to us, just like the NSA's James Clapper has been caught lying to Congress, which is a felony. Here's a clip.
Just one, Madam Chair, and I thank you, and just for you, Director Clapper, again on the surveillance front, and I hope we can do this in just a yes or no answer because I know Senator Feinstein wants to move on. Last summer, the NSA director was at a conference, and he was asked a question about the NSA surveillance of Americans. He replied, and I quote here, "The story that we have millions or hundreds of millions of dossiers on people is completely false." The reason I'm asking the question is, having served on the committee now for a dozen years, I don't really know what a dossier is in this context. So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
All right. Thank you. I'll have additional questions to give you in writing on that point, but I thank you for the answer.
Thank you very much.
You know, it's no surprise that our government officials are lying to us. Our public servants are lying to us. They think that they are modern-day king and queens. They're nobility up there. They control what we do. They think that we're the stupid peasants, and they know better than us. And even if they don't care. They want us to be subservient when in fact they are the servants. They serve us. We do not serve them. And it doesn't even surprise me anymore when I hear Obama say things like this.
Before O'Reilly, let's speed read the news. President Obama taking French President Francois Hollande on a tour as he begins his state visit to the United States. The president's touring Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson. Now the site is officially closed today, but President Obama giving the French president VIP access.
He could observe everything going on about 3 miles to the left.
Let's take a look. Real quick. I'm sure I'm not supposed to, but sorry, we're breaking protocol here.
That's
all right. That's a good thing about being president. I can do whatever I want.
So if that's the threat of more executive action, we report you to stop.
So he said right there, they were at Monticello, and he wanted to just go into Monticello, even though they're not supposed to. He said, hey, you know what, I'm breaking protocol. It doesn't really matter what you say, lady, you're giving me the tour here. I'm going to go into this because I'm the president, and I can do whatever I want. Since when? Since when does a public office afford you more rights than the citizens? It doesn't. You are out of line, Mr. President. You are a fascist. I'm just going to say it. That right there is fascist. And, you know, I believe that we are in a time of epicness in our history, people are going to look back at this time period and realize it's a time of great change. We're either going to be looked at and go into an age of individual freedom and personal responsibility where people actually are responsible for their actions and take that responsibility, and they don't count on the government to bail them out or to stop their neighbor from competing so that they can have a chance. Or we're going to go into an age of tyranny. We're either going to go one way or the other, individual freedom or tyranny. And we're at that point, that fork in the road. It's going to depend on the actions of those who are aware of our growing problems. Those people like you and me, we need to get out there and talk to other people about what we see going on in the world. Try to explain the concepts that I've talked about today. Talk about the NSA. Get the information out there. Don't let this situation die. Don't let it go down. Edward Snowden has sacrificed way too much to get this information out for us just to shrug our shoulders on this again. I want to talk to you for a moment about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. We only got 5 minutes left in the show, so I'm going to speed through this. He was a German Lutheran pastor, a theologian, a dissident of anti-Nazi propaganda and the philosophies. He was a pacifist and a founding member of the Confessing Church. Bonhoeffer became known for his staunch resistance to the Nazi dictatorship. He strongly opposed Hitler's euthanasia program and genocidal persecutions of the Jews. He was also involved in plans by members to assassinate Adolf Hitler. He was arrested in April 1943 by the Gestapo and executed by hanging in 1945 while imprisoned at a Nazi concentration camp, just 23 days before the German surrender. When asked how he could reconcile being a pacifist and still trying to assassinate Hitler, he responded, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil." Think about that. Are you one of the people that's saying that, I've got nothing to hide? Why should I get involved? Why should I care? It's easy to become apathetic and shrug things off, but you have to take it upon yourself to act. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. In my opinion, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. Are you more worried about winning elections than doing what's best for our country? It seems to me that our politicians keep telling us that they're fighting for us as soon as they get into power, as soon as we have everything. It's always the next election, and it always will be. Every one of us has a job to do. What will you say to your grandchildren when they ask what you did when we lost our freedoms? What did you do? I'm still trying to find out my specific purpose, but I know it has something to do with waking as many people up and networking those awoken people together. I think the show might be what I'm supposed to be doing, maybe not. Maybe I'll find my calling later, who knows, but I'm looking. What's your job? What were you born to do? Are you even looking? These are questions that I hope that you're asking yourself, and I hope that you find an answer for it. There's a lot of stuff going on that we need to get together and focus on. There's a lot of problems that are happening in the world. We see inflation, not even just with governmental problems, but we see inflation, and obviously inflation from QE, where the dollar could collapse. All these things, we see war. Iran, they want to park their ships off our shore as a show of force to say that they're not scared of us. If the world decides to stop using the U.S. dollar to buy oil, that could cause a lot of problems. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. Obamacare, I know it's easy to get caught up in it and get confused and not want to get involved in things. But please, everybody, please don't get discouraged. This is exactly what they want. They want you to be discouraged. They want you to give up. There's so much going on, and I understand it's hard to seem like, there's positive things that we can do, but there is. Just get out there, get on the move. Anyway, that's the show for today. I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in week after week. We really appreciate your continued support. If you support the show, make sure you like us on Facebook. Make sure you share this show on your social media. Get the message of liberty out. And I really appreciate everybody. Don't forget to check us out at onthemoveshow.com, here at blogtalkradio.com/onthemoveshow, facebook.com/onthemoveshow, youtube.com/onthemoveshow, twitter.com/onthemoveshow. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, and get on the move.